Hello and welcome to another episode of the F1 Hour. With me as always, my friend and yours, the goatiest of all F1 minds to have ever goated, the one that they call Peter D. Windsor. How are you doing, good sir?
I'm pretty good, Cameron. Good to be back. Thank you very much.
Good man. It's good to have you back, Mr. Windsor. The privilege as always is mine and ours, as is customary, Mr. Windsor. Off the back of the Dutch Grand Prix, what do you think was the biggest story?
Oh, Lando retiring for sure, because that's just not a normal. It's not a normal retirement within the great world of McLaren Mercedes, where nothing ever seems to go wrong these days. Suddenly to have an oil leak, some sort of installation issue, maybe vibration, I don't know. In the old days, you could go and find out. You talk to one of the mechanics 2 days later, and you find out exactly what happened. But I don't suppose we'll ever know more than what is out there at the moment, it being Formula One 2025 spec. But beyond that, of course, if it's an intra-team battle that you are facing in order to win your world championship, in other words, you've got to beat the guy in the other car, and you're constantly 1-2ing or 2-1ing, if you then suddenly fail to finish, that is a massive, massive loss. As I said in the video yesterday, that equates to Lando winning the next 4 races and Oscar finishing second before he's even made up the deficit. And that's a huge ask. I mean, that is a quantum shift. I mean, the only way that's only going to balance out will be if a similar thing happens to Oscar at some point,
Yeah.
which may happen, of course. We don't wish that on anyone, but it could happen. But for Lando to lose, those points is he would have lost 7, and now he's lost what, a lot more than that, 25 to 18, isn't it?
Yeah.
25 to 17 or whatever. So yeah, it's a big one, and it could be a pivotal moment, therefore, for the championship now, because it's very difficult, all things being equal, for Lando to make that up and continually beat Oscar as he has to do. And so yeah, that was it. That was the big story. I think the other one was how well Max Verstappen drove in a car that was patently uncompetitive, and how he maximized every little glitch of every little department of the car in which you can operate, whether it be the tire choice, whether it be the management of the tires, whether it be his track craft. And he did all of that to perfection and got second place. It would have been third, obviously. And that was as good as you could expect. And I think beyond that, as an extension of that, is how appalling generally the opposition is now compared with McLaren. It's unbelievable how slow they all are. And McLaren to be able to put on hard tires at the end, purely to be conservative, and still to blow everybody else away is on softs. And they're all on used tires anyway, apart from Albon. I think it was on a new set of softs. It was just, that said everything, didn't it? The difference there was just ridiculous. And I don't understand. I still don't really understand how Ferrari, Mercedes, and Red Bull can be so far off the pace.
Yeah, I think there's a multitude of reasons, Peter, that we'll try and get into some of them. Let's unpick for the McLaren circumstance first. Though. What do you make of the rumour and speculation that Oscar had been quite crafty? I mean, there's the old Juan Manuel Fangio thesis that what you want to do is win a race extracting the least tax and toll out of yourself and the car. And that towards the end of the final stint, that Oscar Piastri was being quite deliberate and doing a Lewis Hamilton and Nico Rosberg Abu Dhabi 2016, and almost backing Lando up with a view to induce, if there were a reliability issue to be had there, to kind of bring it about. Fact or fiction, Peter?
Well, fact in the sense that he was trying to win at the slowest possible pace, which any racing driver worth his salt does anyway, and nothing new there, nothing dramatic. He did it extremely well, so can't take that away from him. And yeah, why wouldn't you do that? You never ever want to overstrain the car unless you have to. And the hope always, from his point of view, I guess, was that Lando would make some sort of mistake in trying to close the gaps periodically, or run wide, or do something. But I think it's a big ask to believe that Lando's oil line issue, oil pressure issue, whatever it was caused maybe by going over the curbs too much or something, because Formula One cars should be built to sustain that sort of treatment, certainly McLaren's, and Lando's pretty good in that area. So I don't buy the second part of that. I just buy the first part, which is that Oscar did all what he should have done and was supposed to do, which was win at the slowest possible speed.
Yeah, agreed. Pre-race, Peter, there was a lot made of Lando's luck season to date. That, I mean, Australia, Oscar had made a mistake in the changeable conditions, that there was the safety car, the timing of it in Miami, similar thing in Imola, and that Lando had been a benefactor of that. The really harsh decision to penalise Oscar because of the, in inverted commas, brake test at the British Grand Prix. And there's a prevailing sentiment that over the course of 24 races, that fortuitous circumstances tend to even themselves out. Some theorise that, normalised for the aforementioned, that Oscar would be anywhere between 30 and 60 points down the road. Did we see a form of F1 karmic justice yesterday in that, and Lando finally on the receiving end of some bad luck?
You know me, I don't actually believe in luck. So
Yeah.
there's a cause and a reason for everything that happens in this planet. So I don't buy any of that either. I just think, you look at the situation. If you want to avoid trouble, you drive a trouble-free race from the pole every Grand Prix if you're in a car as good as a McLaren. And if you don't qualify on the pole, you're always going to have issues. And you're always going to make mistakes because you're a human being. You minimize the mistakes. You try to make them when they don't really count. That's all you can say. And it's when it's very close and you're putting them both under the microscope in identical cars. Of course, you can come up with all sorts of reasons and backstories as to why this happened, or if he hadn't done this, if he hadn't done that, everything would have been okay. I mean, karma, if you want to look at karma in the race, it was at Mercedes with Kimi Antonelli and Leclerc from George Russell's perspective, wasn't it? That was karma, you could argue. I'm not sure that Kimi had it in his mind when he was doing that, but that's more along the lines of, from George's perspective, he would have been thinking, well, just desserts there, wouldn't he?
Just a tad. Karma from the last race as well, right? Because again, he had the double move. George would have been super pleased with that. Just before we go on to other bits and bobs, though, Peter, I felt I've been really, really harsh on Lando's season today. I feel like he's made a lot of mistakes, errors of the unforced variety, and he's almost harsh on him because I think he's better than that. He can be a generational driver. But for the first time this season, I'd argue, since Australia and Monaco, I thought over the course of the race weekend, he was as near as makes no difference, flawless. I think he should have put it on pole, but for the long distance tow that Oscar got coming round the final turn and a change in wind direction, I think he would have. He was faster coming out the final turn, and the change in wind direction ultimately put paid to his efforts to drop it on pole. He was decent in the race. Max was always going to steal his lunch money on the softer compound tyres. So it's almost like what do you need to do? He was brilliant as far as his process. He did everything right, but sometimes there's a disconnect, right? And your outcomes on you could do everything right, and then it turns out wrong, sadly, for Lando. What did you think of Lando's race weekend? Was it one of the best performances that you'd seen him season today?
Well, he had the pace that I thought he would have, and he should have been on the pole. I think you're absolutely correct there. And the weekend went away from him when he didn't get the pole. That was a critical moment, critical mistake. I think it's very easy looking back to come up with reasons. I mean, he didn't make an obvious mistake on the lap, to come up with reasons why he didn't get the pole. You're talking about wind change, you're talking about things like that. I mean, those are all the variables that are always in there anyway at Zandvoort. For me, and I'm thinking now in terms of the way Niki Lauda used to operate, and to some extent Michael used to operate, Lando's big advantage on the lap at Zandvoort was through turn 8 and turn 9, really breaking into turn 9 and the exit of 9. He was really good there, always has been. It's a great Lando corner, that tightening radius right-hander. And I think he gave away too much on that early on Friday. And I thought it was very telling that Oscar, after he got the pole, said, well, there's a couple of corners where I knew I wasn't really going to get Lando, so I just focused on what I could do really well. And that to me was an indication that there were some corners that he had identified where Lando was good and he had worked at them. And as I said in the video, if you look at Oscar's pace through turn 9 in FP3, he was absolutely spot on Lando there. Now, he didn't do that in qualifying. The adrenaline got a little bit ahead of him, and his minimum speed was a little bit too high mid-corner, turn 9. But it was nonetheless a corner that got his attention, and it certainly got his attention in the race, and he drove beautifully there in that section, that 8-9 section in the race. And that was, you could argue now, with the benefit of hindsight, that Lando shouldn't have been as quick as he was on Friday. He should have held a little bit back because he's trying to beat his teammate. I've always said this. The biggest problem Lando's got is not how good he is and how confident he is. It is this guy that he's got to beat in the other car, this guy called Oscar Piastri, who's really, really good. He's good in that he's very simple and straightforward and unemotional in the way he goes about his racing. And that's a very difficult thing to beat. And I think Lando could have just backed away a little bit on Friday and created a few more question marks within the garage, knowing inside that he had the pace to do it and just keeping his powder dry. But he didn't. He was out there. Every time he got out, he was 0.1, 0.2 quicker than Oscar on Friday. And it wasn't until Q1 that Oscar suddenly decided, right, now's the time to go out on a scrub set of softs at the back end of Q1 and just redress the balance, and I'll go quicker now. And from that moment, I think Lando was a bit confused as to what to do next, because he then did his lap in Q2 with the soft tires, and it was a good lap, but it wasn't a lot better than Oscar's, and that was the problem. And I don't think Oscar played that really well. He just did the normal thing. He looked at where Lando was good, and he put his head down in perhaps a way that Lewis Hamilton doesn't these days, because he's a 7 times world champion, or Sebastian Vettel didn't when he was in his last year at Red Bull alongside Ricciardo, because he was a 4 times world champion. They don't look enough at detail like that. But Oscar's still hungry as a dog, and he's looking at where Lando is quicker. And I'm not sure Lando took that into account. Now, having said all of that, it sounds pretty good to say all that. But if I was managing Lando, I'm not sure I would have foreseen that and predicted that was going to happen going into Zandvoort. I would have said, wow, yeah, he's got him here. No way Oscar's going to get him, it's going to be as quick through turn 9. But, it's pretty clear now that had he sandbagged a little bit on Friday, he might have got the pole on Saturday, in my opinion.
It's interesting that you say that, Mr. Windsor, because again, a lot of the F1 community is saying that Oscar Piastri, his gift is in his ability not just to improve season on season, but this season, every single weekend, it's like Lando comes out and goes gangbusters and he's putting in 108s as he did in free practice. And then all of a sudden you've got Oscar, who like Bjorn Borg used to do in Wimbledon, builds himself a race weekend and he improves gradually. It's incremental gains, and then all of a sudden, Bob's your uncle, he's dropped it on pole. Do you think this is the end of the season as far as it being competitive? Lando potentially next season will be his best opportunities. 34 points, an unassailable lead now for Oscar.
Well, just get back to the first point, and where you described it, I think is absolutely right. But I'd like to add this. It's one thing to look at your teammate and seeing how quickly he's going. And in the normal F1 parlance, you look at how late he's braking, where he's putting on the power, minimum speeds, etc. With Lando, you've got to be a lot more perceptive, and you've got to look at how low his minimum speed is and how long he's sustaining that low minimum speed. And that's quite a difficult thing to swallow if you are higher minimum speed and all you want to do is get on the power, a little bit like Oscar. And yet he did that. That is the impressive thing. It's not just a question of, I'm going to brake here or turn in there. He looked at it in a great amount of depth. So that's a good point. Getting on to the next one about the championship. Well, as I said, it's a massive gap. If Lando's leading Monza and Oscar's engine blows, I suppose it's all back to square one again, isn't it? But the odds of that happening pretty small, aren't they?
No. Yeah.
It's going to take something like that for Lando to get back into some sort of position where he can really race Oscar for the championship now.
Yeah. And what do you make of it being a boring season? Because I've had a gazillion messages saying, all right then, come on, I'll see you this time next year, mate. I'm gonna go and do something else now that I know pretty much 95% of the time Oscar's going to go and take the drivers. It is.
Well, I think I should be asking you about that because you're plugged in much more than I to social media and the community. If the two McLaren drivers were Max Verstappen and Charles Leclerc, and they had exactly the points they have now, do you think everyone would be saying this is a really boring year? We're going to come back next year and see what's happening?
I think if they were even on points, even more even on points, I think it would be a much more blockbuster season and the drive to survive.
So what you're saying is that people think that Oscar and Lando are boring compared with, say, Max and Charles?
I think they're much less blockbuster, Peter. They're
Why?
They're almost.
Why?
I feel like they're almost. I've heard the term polite being bandied around, that they're almost too polite and too cordial with each other. There was a brilliant article on Motorsport magazine where they talked about, again, too polite was the characterization as compared with the fiery rivalries of Christmas past in, 89, Senna and Prost, where Prost very famously said, Ayrton has a problem. He thinks that he can't kill himself. And then you've got Mansell and Piquet. Again, it's Piquet saying all kind of things about Mansell's family and his what. Like, it's this. Do you know what I mean? It's when you have drivers that are willing to go at it, and they will. There's no length to which they won't go. A 2021 Lewis and Max, and it's like it doesn't need a translation. Doesn't need for a Sky Sports broadcast to say, to be a bit disingenuous and say, well, it's still all to play for. Because do you know what I mean? You've got Mansell and Piquet, for Pete's sake, going hammer and tongs, saying bad things about each other in the press and the media. It's like that captures even the most casual of casuals. And so now I think it's a bit of a tough sell. And again, it speaks to the point that you always make, Peter, right? The ever evolving makeup of the F1 community. Whereas, I don't know, this time 20 years ago, it would have been grey-bearded F1 vets like myself who would have been watching F1 irrespective of who's leading and the delta that they had over the second place person. But now 40% of the community, or 40% of the paying public, the viewing public, appear on a promise of Drive to Survive, sexy edits and pan outs and pan ins, and it's Horner saying fix your fudging car. So a lot of 40 to 50% of the current F1 fan base are here expecting it to be 2021 and 1989 and 94 and 2012 and 2016 every single year. And that sadly just isn't the way that it works, is it, Peter?
No, it isn't. But it's still not, doesn't pacify my thought 100%, because, okay, let's take a different example. If Ferrari had a great car this year and it was Charles and Lewis doing what Oscar and Lando are doing, dominating the racing, and you never really knew from one race to another which was going to win, but it was going to be one of the two. And let's assume they had the same relationship they have now, which is a reasonable assumption because they've both been around a while, they're both reasonably mature, and they're not going to start going at one another as Mansell and Prost did, Mansell and Piquet did, or Senna and Prost did. Would the fans be loving it even so?
I think they're...
Is it only about cursing and swearing and saying hateful things, or is it more than that? Is it charisma? I don't know. That's my point. And I think it's a sad reflection on the Formula One community and the Formula One world that we're not totally enraptured by the battle between Lando and Oscar in the way we would be if it was, Max versus Lewis or whatever, because these are two very skillful racing drivers doing what they do extremely well. And what is wrong with being polite? Why is that a bad thing? Aren't we in this world of everybody has to be nice to one another? We're not even allowed to imitate accents anymore. We have to be incredibly correct the way we treat one another and the respect that's shown and equality for all. And yet on the other side, they want two guys that are going to go at one another with daggers. It doesn't make any sense to me. You can't have both, one or the other.
I think, Mr. Windsor, you do the size of the un-PC community a disservice. For example, you mentioned the accents that we're not supposed to do. I've had people message me directly, Peter, and say, I want Mr. Windsor to do more accents. I think they're hilarious and they're brilliant, and F1 needs more of that, more personality. So I think what's happened is that there is a portion of the fan base, that the paying F1 viewership, who don't want the straight-laced F1. They want to see Max come out and say, I'm going to headbutt you as a journo if you ask me that question again, because everything is too straight-laced and it's too PC and too much corporate peacocking, and everybody says the same cookie-cutter answer to the post-race scrum every single time. So it's like, I want to see Windsor be a bit, like, show his personality.
Be careful, though, because not you, but everybody has to be careful, because we don't actually, there's a very fine line now between getting out there and saying what's on your mind and saying it bluntly, and saying something that is illegal.
Agreed.
Where is that line now? I mean, there are certain words we all know that you cannot say, and if you did say them, you could be in serious legal trouble, whereas you wouldn't have been 15 years ago. Nobody seems to be out there saying this is the list of things you can do, you cannot do, in the same way that you say the speed limit is 120. If you do 119, you're okay. 121, you're not. Who is the arbiter here? Everybody has to be very careful with this. It's one thing to say, oh, come on, let's just call a spade a spade. It's quite another to say, I don't really care, what happens? I'm going to say this and that's it. It's like running a YouTube channel and putting on lots of rights-owned footage and saying, I don't really care. It's a question of whether you actually respect the law or not.
Yeah, you're right, Peter. There is the law, but there is
well, there's the law, and then there's the unwritten law. That's the problem, and it's the unwritten law that's the issue, and which nobody really understands, because it's, dare I say it, unwritten.
Yeah, 100%. I think if you use Max, we'll talk about Max in a second as far as his performance over the weekend, but I think Max is a really good. He's emblematic of the point that I'm trying to make, because ultimately, of course, he knows there's certain words that he can't say, and he's been a bit of a line stepper historically. If you look at some of his tidbits and sound bites that he said, but ultimately, Peter, he just wants to drive, and the rest is, he almost doesn't care for the. Do you know what I mean? The political correctness of the thing. Even in the post race presser, they asked him. I think Clarkson must have asked him who was asked all three of them. I think it was post qualifying, actually. I correct myself, but he asked them who was the first winner of the Dutch Grand Prix when it happened back in the day, and then they were like, I think Oscar said Lauda, and then the follow up question was, well, who put it on pole? And Max looked at his dad and looked at Oscar and was like, well, my father-in-law. And then there was another follow-up question, and Max was like, I don't care. He just came out and said it. And people, Peter, although it was disrespectful and attacked tongue-in-cheek and almost rude, I think people are tired of the cookie-cutter answers now, and there is redeeming feature in difference, and that's why Max has this fan base of people that just love his ability to not care and shoot straight from the hip. That's why, Mr. Windsor, people want to see you and do your accents, because life is way too bloody serious, right? Surely. I don't know.
Yeah, but it comes back to my other point, which I've made a while ago now, so I'll remake it, which is that there is a role for a racing driver, probably any other sport as well, but certainly in Formula One, to be in a black helmet with a dark visor.
Oh, 100%.
And never to show your face, and be fined $1 million a year for doing no interviews, and nobody ever speaks to you. And as soon as you get out of the car, you disappear into your dark window motorhome and do your thing, and you win 5 Grand Prix a year, and you never speak. And if that happened, obviously it's impossible, but if that happened, he would be the biggest star on the planet Earth for sure.
I think
so. That's the other extreme, and I think Max sort of tends to go in that sort of direction, and I applaud him for it, because why do you need to say anything to these idiotic questions?
Yeah, I think that's what Max is the closest thing that we have to that, Peter. And I think if he had his own way, he'd do that. And you see a couple of interviews. I mean, he's just done one with Chris Harris, a 60-minute long expose where they were driving around in
Yeah, I
Mustangs.
saw it. It wasn't really an interview though. It was all sort of, oh wow, isn't this amazing? Oh, I'm
A
scared.
little bit. He was.
It,
I think he's
it
got a.
scratched. It took about 1% off the surface of reality. That one.
But the point.
Anyway,
The point is, Peter. Though he
yeah,
talked not about the Met Gala or it wasn't about the glitz and glam that so comes with Formula One now. All he did was talk about driving, and it was lines, and that's why that video, Peter's done probably upwards of 5 million now.
yeah,
It's
because it was all put together by Ford, and it's part of the Red Bull hub thing, which is
yeah,
fine. But it didn't actually answer any questions at all about his driving. It's just a bit like the Senna movie. It was incredibly successful because nobody had ever seen that stuff before. But it still only scratched the surface of
yeah,
what is out there. As I keep saying, if you really want to sell Formula One to the public, there's so much material out there that we're not even filming, let alone keeping in a vault.
yeah,
And it's all real stuff. And
yeah,
it's such a shame. It's such a shame that we're not doing that. And we're not doing a lot more about how they actually drive, which corners they do incredibly well, which corners they don't. All that stuff is fascinating. But because nobody ever goes near it, then, it's just left by the wayside. It's a great shame. But yeah, I think Max is very good. And I think Oscar's very good at keeping things very simple and low key as well, and deflecting from his own uh, persona, which is nice. I thought it was really nice how he immediately said, "Oh, I don't know if I can, I don't know if I can follow Isaac's act." When he was about to speak, and I thought that was it's a charming thing to say and very Oscar. And it kind of already you thought, wow, this guy's certainly got it. And I find that sort of thing very, very attractive, that he has that side to his personality. And you can see why he's so good in a racing car, because he just keeps things very calm and sized up. We heard a lot of radio transmission to Lando yesterday, not much to Oscar. And yet, for sure, there was quite a lot going on. And every time they were saying to Lando, come on, you can do it, Lando, it's a straight race. For sure, they were saying to Oscar, just take it easy, mate. You got this one. Don't
yeah,
worry.
yeah. It's in the bag.
It's not in the bag, but just focus on what you're doing. You'll be fine.
Keep doing what you're doing, Oscar. And every time I hear Oscar speak of late, there's been a common thread as far as his recipe for success. He keeps talking about consistency, not for consistency's sake, but being consistently quick, and overlaid that with this consistently quick in the clutch times when it matters most, like
Exactly.
Q3. And I think he's
Playing the
brilliant for
big
that.
points well, and that's always what wins a championship. There's no question about that. But he can actually afford himself the luxury now of knowing that Lando's for sure going to have some good weekends by the law of averages. And on those weekends, as long as he's just there tucked in behind Lando doing the job, he's heading towards his world championship.
Yeah.
I'm not saying he'll be thinking that way. He'll still be wanting to win every race, because the minute you don't think like a winner, it becomes a problem. But nonetheless, deep down in his psyche, there will be that knowledge that for whatever reason, if Lando's ahead of him, all he's got to do is just sit there and he's going to be fine.
Yeah. Agreed. Talk to me about Scuderia Ferrari, Peter, because how could they be worse than they have been season to date, and then they go and up their underperformance? They say, I see you that level of underperformance, and I will raise you this. Impossibly incompetent across the board. I was particularly angry. Lewis made a mistake, changeable conditions, puts it on the white stuff. You wouldn't expect that from a 7-time champion. But the reason I've yet to understand, as you've mentioned, a reason why they'd box Charles Leclerc around a track that's historically very difficult to overtake, changeable conditions, risk weight that this is. I understand there's a naked risk to reward calculation. Of course there is, but there is always a risk that comes with coming back through the pack, having to encounter a Kimi Antonelli. Why is there not anybody, Peter, on the Ferrari pit wall that's capable of making some real world decision, as you say about Jonathan Wheatley, sticking their hand out, touching some grass, and utilising a semblance of an F1 brain?
Or as in the case of Haas Ferrari, doing what they did if Ferrari had been that slow, and starting on a one-stop strategy and doing as well as they did. There's no lateral thinking. And I not only is there no lateral thinking, but also there's a predominance of middle management, particularly on the strategy side. And I don't think it's just Ferrari. I think you see that at most Formula One teams now. You've got to have the strategy department. Undercut, undercut. They all do this. It's like they do a thesis at university on the undercut. He goes in. We've got to follow him. We've got to beat him. Undercut him. Cover him. It's complete. It's a nonsense. And there's a lot of people now making a lot of money and careers out of this whole ridiculous strategy thing. Instead of just thinking and looking and seeing what's going on around in the structure of the race, oh no, it says we got to undercut. And that's the trap Ferrari fell into, I think. They didn't say this is only Kimi Antonelli. Come on, give us a break. Charles can deal with this situation. Keep him out there. Oh no, he's coming, we better cover him. What was that all about? It's demeaning apart from anything else. Anyway, they were so slow on Friday. That was the problem. I mean, I noticed in the sort of Freddie Vasseur post-race quotes, there was a little bit of along the lines of, well, we're pretty competitive in the race, and that was the good point, and we're taking that to Monza. Yeah, of course they were competitive in the race because they were sort of mixed up in a midfield that involved Kimi Antonelli, apart from anything else, and Isaac Hadjar. I mean, give me a break. This is Ferrari. They should be miles ahead of that lot. And as I said in my video, I think it is absolutely, scandalous now is probably the right word, how poor the aero is on the Ferrari, and not only the Ferrari, the Red Bull and also the Mercedes, if you take an average of the year, compared with the job that McLaren have done. Customer team of Mercedes, it's still beyond belief, really, that McLaren can get it so right and the rest can get it so wrong for so long. And it is there to be done. As I said, if Racing Bulls can sort of pull themselves up from where they were, thanks in large part to Isaac Hadjar. I mean, if we're judging Racing Bulls on Yuki Tsunoda and Liam Lawson, they'd probably be still in the midfield. So it does show a lot about how good Hadjar is. But nonetheless, they've got a very good car there now, arguably better than a Red Bull. So they have managed to make progress. Williams too, a little bit. But Ferrari, Mercedes, and Red Bull, absolutely stagnating, going nowhere aerodynamically. And it is appalling to see how bad they are. If they want a Formula One, which is totally dominated by aerodynamics, everybody's on the same tires, basically has the same engine these days, given the number of templates there are, and half the car is designed for you by the rule book. And it does come down to all these tiny aero details. If they want that sort of Formula One, then how is it that they've managed to get it so wrong? I just don't get it. I really don't get it. And from Liberty's point of view, I would have thought it's a worry because you've got the three biggest teams in Formula One there, excluding McLaren, obviously, who have no clue about what they're doing. They don't know where they're going and what they're doing wrong. No idea. That's quite clear because if they did, they would have fixed it by now.
Yeah.
And that doesn't say much. And so I suppose Liberty would say, well, we've got the new regs coming next year. Let's hope it's a big shake-up next year. Hope is the operative word there. Yes, there's a lot of power unit stuff, but that's going to bring its own issues as well in terms of public persona and other issues that come along. And then you've got all the drama of active aero and push to pass, and it's a mess. It's a mess. And there's never been a Formula One where there have been so many common parts. In other words, so difficult to do a really bad car. And yet, look at the difference between McLaren and Red Bull around Zandvoort, let alone Ferrari and Mercedes. Unbelievable. As I said, they're on hard tires, pulling away a second a lap.
Insane.
From Max on soft tires.
That's ridiculous.
It's absolutely insane. I don't actually remember a Formula One where there was that much speed differential. Usually it was tires, flat 12 versus V12, V8s versus turbo, whatever it was. There was always some major factor, differentiating factor. There isn't now. There's no differentiating factor at all, apart from tiny little aero details that nobody can see anyway. What's it about? If you're the average Dutch Grand Prix fan and you go to one race a year and it's at Zandvoort, and you go to that to cheer Max Verstappen, and you see the Red Bull and he's driving around, and you think, wow, doesn't look great. And you see the McLaren, yeah, wow, doesn't look great. You can't actually see any difference in the speed because they're going out individually. And you put them all together in the race, and you see the McLaren passing him on the outside and disappearing into the distance. And you think, what is going on?
It's outrageous.
There's no logical explanation for it apart from error.
Yeah, it's outrageous. And we're in this weird sort of F1 purgatory now that everybody's divested out of incremental gains in 2.5, now focused on 2026 because that's where the biggest upside is to be gained, right? And it's almost like we're purgatory for the next.
Yeah, I hear what you say, but the reality of it is that they, even if we didn't have big changes for 26, and even if there were no budget cap rules, I guarantee it would be exactly the same.
Wow.
And it's not a question of money. It's not a question of time. They don't know. They patently don't know what to do. And it's because the actual parts you've got to manufacture, assuming there is some sort of system that McLaren have got aerodynamically compared with Red Bull right now, the actual physical parts that you would have to change on the Red Bull are not that expensive and that complicated to make. It's knowing what to do. That's the issue. And you go, well, that's the expensive thing. That's, that's CFD, that's Windsor, whatever. Yeah, I buy that. But nonetheless, they've had long enough at it to get to it. And yet they're still nowhere near it.
Oof.
Nowhere near. You would imagine over the August break, I know they can't do any work and I know everything's basically in parc fermé, but you would imagine at some point in the August break that the engineers at Ferrari or Red Bull or Mercedes would have got together in the local pub or restaurant. And they would have said, right, we can't do that much, but let's just think about setup. Let's just think about what we're actually going to do at Zandvoort, because we can't carry on as we are. This is ludicrous. And yet it appears as if they just wheeled the cars out of, where they were in Hungary and just took them to Zandvoort. Yeah, longer cord on the front wing of the Red Bull. Big deal.
Yeah. No, I think you run the money there, Peter. I think there was a report saying that Ferrari bought a hybrid of their Hungary and Austria cars or something. They're not doing anything. They're not doing anything.
They're not. They're not saying we are massively off the pace. What is going on?
Yeah.
And as I say, it's not a question of money. It's a question of knowledge. And that's the problem. And I think to some extent, for the answer to that, you look at Racing Bulls and you look at a smaller team, great bunch of racers, which Alan Permain very capable of identifying and putting together and getting the best from. Jonathan Eddles too. And I think similarly, you could say Jonathan Wheatley is kind of doing that job at Sauber now, just getting the good people to do what they do well, making sure everybody's a round peg in a round hole and there's no friction anywhere and everybody's getting the best from one another. And you've got lots of water cooler meetings going on and brain picking one from another. And there's none of this sort of middle management interdepartmental rivalry and competition that grows so easily when the team is too big. And you see teams like Sauber and Racing Bulls doing well as a result.
Mr. Windsor, let me ask you about Sir Lewis Hamilton very quickly. I'm concerned. I feel like this is the end of an era, and we always knew it was going to be difficult going against Charles. He's already 40-something points behind Charles in the championship. But is this... Are Lewis Hamilton's problems still, can we characterise them under the umbrella heading still of him acclimatising to the Scuderia Ferrari circumstance? He's got to learn a new language. It's a brand new team. They work in a way that's very different. The working culture is very different as versus Mercedes. The brake discs are different. The engine torque curve is very different, and the engine braking, therefore. Can we explain away Lewis Hamilton's underperformance season to date? 14 races now back to back, or 15 back to back, no podiums. That makes him the second most underperforming Ferrari driver as far as the length without podiums. Is that all explainable under the umbrella heading of acclimatization, brand new team, or is there something more insidious going on here that needs addressing?
Well, he won the sprint race, so let's give him full acknowledgement of that in China. Yeah, but I mean, I'm the first person on the planet Earth to put my hand up and say sprint races don't count. I mean, on the basis that Jim Clark always said you should any driver that needs more than 4 laps to learn a circuit shouldn't be in a Grand Prix car. I would assume the extrapolation of that is any driver that needs more than a race with a new team to get used to the car shouldn't be in a Grand Prix car either. That's about what you would say. So I don't think you can blame anything other than Lewis not anticipating a lot of the things that Ferrari have. And beyond that, not digging deep and working on his own driving and coming to realization of how George was able to outpace him at Mercedes, and then improving and upping his game in the winter of 2024-25 going into Ferrari. I don't think he did that. I've said this many times. I think he went there thinking breath of fresh air, Ferrari, pasta, Maranello, Cavallino, F40s. Isn't this wonderful? I'm a 7 times world champion. This is where I belong. Bang! What's this all about? Whoa! Charles Leclerc's quicker than I thought. Wow! How do I drive the front end of this thing? And it was all a shock. And we're still in that mode. Going into Zandvoort, as I said, I always felt that the Liam Lawsons, the Yuki Tsunodas, and dare I say it, the Lewis Hamiltons would be nearer their teammates than at most circuits, because there's a limit to what you can get wrong at Zandvoort. I mean, the last corner, and Tarzan's Tarzan, and Hansrug's Hansrug, providing you don't run too wide and hit the guardrail. Yeah, Shivlak, not bad, but it's pretty peters out halfway through, doesn't it, really? And then you've got that nice little technical bit in the middle, but Lewis should be okay there, you would imagine. And he kind of was, he wasn't off. If you looked at that one race, Zandvoort, as a sort of snapshot of Lewis at Ferrari, you would say, yeah, he's there or thereabouts, isn't he? He's almost there with Charles. He was sticking with him. He didn't have, in traffic, wasn't brilliant, but he was right there, wasn't losing time to Charles in terms of lap time. He almost there in qualifying. He was ahead of him most of the weekend. And then he stuffed it in the wet. Yeah, well, rookie mistake. Shouldn't do that. It's not saying the wet, the semi-wet. That was not good. Lack of concentration. Maybe it was Charles having come in and thinking, I'm in next. I really want to come in. What are the pros and cons of coming in, staying out? Have they got it right? I don't really trust the strategy. Oops, bang, I've crashed into the guardrail. Maybe it was a little bit of the whole, Ferrari drama that took away his concentration. And so you could, if you wanted to be really positive, and say, well, but Lewis is right there on Charles' pace. What more do you expect? Zandvoort. Okay, we'll see what happens at Monza through the second Lesmo. And then we'll make a proper call as to where he's at. He should be okay at Singapore, I would have thought. I mean, where's Charles going to be a lot better at Singapore than Lewis? Maybe just high-speed braking, consistency, getting the front end to work through the last section as well. Yeah, Charles will probably have in there, but it won't be that big a difference. Monza, as I say, Monza first and second Lesmos, I think Charles will be, I can't wait to see Charles through there, actually, to be honest. I think he's going to be really good. And high-speed braking accuracy, I just hope Lewis doesn't fall into the trap of wanting to brake late, because he's still not using the front end enough to brake as he used to in the good Mercedes days. And therefore, if he's in this new world of just braking late in a straight line, trying to brake later than a Carlos Sainz or a Liam Lawson, he's going to have a lot of lockups and a lot of dramas. So I hope it doesn't go that way for him.
To your first point, Peter, about Lewis being kind of on the money, not a gazillion miles away from Charles. There was an article written earlier on in the week before the Dutch Grand Prix that said the average qualifying delta between Charles and Lewis over the first 6 races this year has been 0.2 tenths. And then since Imola, there has been convergence. It was 2 tenths. Now is 8/100ths. So it's not like the underlying pace hasn't been converging. But as far as Lewis, 7-time champion, some say the GOAT of Formula One, as far as his ability to deliver on a race on Sunday, something's going on. And that concerns me, Peter, because Lewis Hamilton, as brilliant as he was in qualifying, his gift was always his ability to deliver in the race. It was race pace, even over the course of the past 36 months. So I can't explain it away, Peter. I am concerned. This feels like, especially seeing the pictures yesterday of Lewis walk away and kind of, I don't know, do the steward's job, the marshal's job for them, get the Ferrari front wing, and it just felt felt really final, like a seminal moment in Lewis Hamilton's career. Almost, I hear Matt Bishop speaking about he doesn't like seeing Ayrton Senna in the Williams overalls because it almost portends the tragic ending, and this isn't Lewis, but I think in a couple of years' time, yesterday I was looking back at pictures of Lewis in the black Mercedes overalls because it just brings back better memories. It's almost like I want to erase completely the past 12 months of seeing Lewis in red.
Yeah, I think you could look at that two ways. When I saw him faffing around with the front wing debris, I was thinking, wow, this is the Rye House days. And it's almost as if he's going to start changing gear ratios now in the back of the car and stuff. That's quite good, seeing him getting his hands dirty like that. I quite like that. It didn't worry me that. But going back to the qualifying thing, I'm a little bit surprised by those stats. And they don't, I'm only guessing, but I don't think they probably take into account the number of times that Lewis didn't get out of, dare I say, even Q1, let alone Q2. And because you can't then compare lap times.
Yeah,
they probably compare them within, say, Q2, but you can't compare it. I mean, there's no way he's been anywhere near Charles in qualifying in reality. And that's the problem. And as I said before the season started, in order to be Lewis Hamilton the way he is and the way he has been, not against George, but the other Lewis, he needs to go, at Ferrari, he needs to be at least 50% with Charles, if not slightly ahead of him. Let's face it, he's a 7 times world champion and Charles never won a championship. So that's the sort of position that he needed to be in. And so if he's even 1/10 behind Charles, that's a good thing for Charles, not a good thing for Lewis at all. And it's more than that anyway. So I think Zandvoort brought them artificially close, but I hope I'm wrong. Maybe he's going to be right there at Monza as well. We'll see. I mean, in theory, if the Ferrari's half okay at Monza, which it should be, then Lewis should be within, we should be within 2/10 of Charles around there, shouldn't he? I doubt he'd out-qualify him, but he'll be within a couple of tenths.
But the problem is, Peter, his Achilles heel has always been, season to date, the medium and high speed twisties, and what are you going to get around Monza? Lesmo 1 and Lesmo 2. Lewis is not going to have the confidence that he needs around there to be the best driver in the world or one of the greatest that we've ever seen. He just doesn't have the confidence in the wheels underneath him, sadly. And so,
but again, it's not confidence. It's doing what he does well again. And he's never gone back through that relearning process. It's like somebody like Nadal, who's very good at the net, realizing halfway through his career that he's losing too many matches because he doesn't have a big enough serve, and spending 9 months improving his serve, and then never going back to the net and being as good as he was at the net. That would never have happened. He would always have kept up his work at the net and would have gone straight back if there was any problem with it and fixed it. But it's with Lewis, it's like he lost all that feel for the front end of the car and driving with the front end when he went through that horrendous period at Mercedes from 22 to 24. And he's never got that back. He's a little bit, as I said, I thought Silverstone, he looked half reasonable. But I think Monza will be the first test really since Silverstone, because the circuits have been a little bit Mickey Mouse since then. And we'll see what happens at Monza with that. I mean, you mentioned the Ascari chicane. It's quite a narrow entry there. And so it's quite difficult to be anything other than what the car's going to let you be into that left-hander. And then it's basically then, just loading the car up in a way that I think he'll be quite comfortable through there. I don't think that'll be an issue for him. High-speed braking into Parabolica might be an issue, though, in terms of the way he uses the front there, bearing in mind the importance of the exit at the Parabolica. And as I say, the first and second Lesmo will be an interesting one as well.
I fear. I
don't
think that.
In his best Merc and McLaren days, Lewis was always superb through the first chicane in terms of the amount of steering lock he gave the car in the right-hander as setting up for the left and coming out with a really, really good exit. A bit like Barcelona turn 2, turn 3. That was one of his best places all year, always. So in theory, I can't imagine he's going to lose it there. I think he'll still be the same Lewis there. I'm pretty sure he will be. I hope he is anyway.
Peter, just lastly on Lewis, do you place any stock in this theory that the ground effect rules and regs, the inception of those in 2022 just simply hasn't suited Lewis Hamilton's driving style, that he's not a ground effect driver, and therefore in 2026 you can expect to see something of a resurgence, because it's like them that the cars will be more like, as far as how you optimize for downforce, more like 2007 and suit Lewis Hamilton's driving style.
No, I think that's an absurd generalization, because I think if he had been driving for Red Bull in 2022, he would have loved ground effect and he would have been super quick, even with Max in the other car. May not have beaten Max, but he would have been right there. No, it was just how bad the Mercedes was. It was nothing to do with ground effect. It was just a terrible racing car with a moving center of pressure, bouncing and changing grip from front to rear axle virtually by the corner. An undrivable car. The only guy that could drive that would be somebody incredibly young and fearless and reflexy. George Russell. So there you go. And so it's nothing to do with ground effect per se. It's just to do with how bad the Mercedes was, having had so many good years in good racing cars. And Lewis, I think, was just shocked by that and had nothing that he could look back on and say, oh yeah, this is what I did when we had this problem at McLaren or Merck, because he'd never had any of these issues before. They were all new to him, and they were new to the team. They didn't know what was going on either. They were all completely shocked, and that was the problem. It was just they were in a state of shock for 2 years, and George got quicker and quicker, and that was it. And then he went to Ferrari without really changing anything, with still all those shock waves going through him, and hoping that they'd all suddenly disappear the minute he got into a red car. And they didn't.
No.
Guess what? He had to work really hard. And Lewis knows that. I mean, that's what he did when he lost the championship to Rosberg. He put his head down and he improved dramatically, particularly in qualifying. And he applied himself a lot more to modern technology, if that's the right word. And the results were clear to see. And he did that. He's not afraid to dig deep, not afraid to be self-critical, in the same way Max is not afraid to be self-critical, even today. But I think he got carried on the way. This is the problem when you go from one team to another, and you go to that team not because they value you as a very, very fast racing driver. It's because they value more your brand and your name and your success and your experience and all the things that you're going to bring to the team, like Valtteri Bottas and Sergio Perez are going to bring to Cadillac, all that amazing experience that's going to find them 3 seconds a lap immediately. Yeah, right. When you get hired for the wrong reasons, you don't then work on the things on which you should be working. And that's the issue. And I just hoped that over the August break, Lewis didn't go anywhere glamorous or exotic or even relaxing. And all he did was work really hard on his ability to extend the straights again and break into a rotation point that fits the moment. And I hope that's all he did 24/7 for the entire August break. I doubt it. That's what I hope he did.
I hope so too, Peter. I hope so too, sincerely. More than words might convey. As he round third base though, Mr. Windsor, I need to ask you about Toto Wolff, George and Maximilian Verstappen, the love triangle that ensues between the three. I feel, I'm not a massive George fan as a person, but like you say, I agree with you, Peter. He's been, some say he's driver of the season. He's been brilliant, up there, right up there with Max season today and Oscar to a certain extent. However, you come to learn that George, as far as the contract negotiations, that George has as his manager and team principal Toto Wolff. And at this juncture, George is doing one of these, saying like, where's my contract? You say that I'm the next one. I'm the guy that's going to lead Mercedes back to the promised land. Yeah, every other word that comes out of Toto's mouth at the moment is Max Verstappen. If you were George's team manager, knowing that he's got this kind of conflict of interest, he has as his manager Toto Wolff, and he also has as his team principal Toto Wolff. What's the panacea there, Peter? Does he need to cut ties, managerial ties with Toto, and go and join, I don't know, CAA or WM? It's somebody like that to make sure that he's getting a fair shake of things and he gets the 2+1 that his performance season to date has earned.
So what you're saying, he's saying to Toto, I want a contract, and Toto's saying, I'm not going to give you a contract. Is that what's going on?
So I think George I think George previously would have wanted a multi-year contract, so a 2+1, 2-year base with an option for an extended 1-year deal. Now, however, seeing that the Mercedes isn't the best car, I think George has been brilliant thus far this year. I think George will want a 1+1, so a 1-year deal to see whether pervade the competitive landscape in 26, see whether Mercedes have delivered on their promise of building the quickest car and Petronas with their recipe sustainable fuel or whatever else the deal is. But I think George will want to see confidence in the contract. Whatever it looks like, give it to me now. Stop waiting and dilly-dallying and seeing what Max is going to do, because George in his own mind will be the main character, right? He'll be the number one driver for Mercedes. Give me the contract then. But now that Toto's iffing and butting, he's taken so much time and he's procrastinating and wanting to see what Max Verstappen's going to do.
We know what Max is going to do, so I don't understand
where's the contract. So Toto's now come out and said at the Dutch Grand Prix that they're nickel and diming over the terms. That there is announcements to come. It won't happen before Monza, but there will be an announcement incoming about George's contract. Do you think that's fair enough, Peter? I think they've done George a little bit dirty there in deprioritising. He's the guy who's kind of he's been the difference.
Toto's basically not an idiot. And if I was George, I'd be thinking, well, whatever. He knows how much money I want. If he's not going to pay me, not much I can do about it. And I'll just bear that in mind next time we sit down with him. But he placed me at Williams. I'm in this car. Relax, chill out. I wouldn't be concerned about any of that. Even the Max thing, because even if the Red Bull is terrible in 26 and Toto offers Max $1 trillion to go to Mercedes and he goes to Mercedes, George is going to get a decent drive somewhere for sure. Probably Red Bull, and what's the problem? I think people make too much of all this. And I think hopefully George is intelligent enough just to back away and relax on this and try to get as much money as he obviously can, being his market value. And Toto, if he's managing him, will be raiding the Mercedes budget to pay his driver. Or is it the other way around? Can't work it out. So I think that's all right. At the end of the day, remember Jackie Stewart, Ken Tyrrell never had anything in writing ever. And they did pretty well. And we can't, they were the old days. But they weren't the old days because Jackie Stewart was the highest paid Grand Prix driver of the time and was doing very well, managed by IMG. So if Jackie felt that was okay, then why would George Russell not feel that was okay? That's one point. Secondly, I love the way George said when they asked him to swap positions, I'm sorry. I thought that was brilliant. And I love the way when I can't remember who it was weaving under brakes. Who was it? Somebody said, weaving under braking. It was like, come on, Murray Walker 2 here. I think he's great, George. I really got a lot of time for him. Just chill out. Why is everybody so worried about his contract? Let him sort it out.
Yeah.
If he's not getting paid his worth, that can also work in his favor, because what you do then is you start working on your bonuses and make sure you get the money in bonuses and things like that. There's so many things you can do, I think. I wouldn't worry about it if I was George.
Fair. Maybe you're right, Peter.
I wouldn't worry about it. And he's going to get a drive anywhere if he's available, for sure. I mean, he's not in any way going to be wanting for a Grand Prix drive the rest of his career. Isn't that enough? From a guy that was there in karting, hoping one day he might be in Formula One. He's now able to pick and choose almost where he's going to go. He's done a great job. And he's with a good team, good people. I say good team, nice people. Toto's above all a racer, isn't he? He understands it all. And look how well Toto's looked after Valtteri Bottas. Another driver that he manages still probably.
Yeah.
He looked after him in every respect, got him that drive at Alpha, got him everything that you could possibly want. He looked after Bottas. And now he's probably been instrumental in getting him in the Cadillac drive. So if you're going to look after Bottas that well, imagine what you'd do for George.
But then there's a thing, I suppose there's a prevailing sentiment around Toto that he, I suppose duplicitous is the word, that he'll say one thing and then go away and do. So, I mean, as an example, he said that he doesn't want to verbatim, quote, flirt outside of the relationship as far as the driver pairing that he has currently, that it was always George and Antonelli and that was the priority. And then you see Max Verstappen on on Toto's yacht, rumoured to be talking about a contract in.
Rumoured, the important word there. But why wouldn't Max go on the yacht anyway, if that's where he wanted to go and Toto has a yacht? And if they want to talk about, oh, wouldn't it be great one day if we could work together? That's not in any way, there's no disservice there to George or to Kimi Antonelli. That's just normal life. It's no different from Jim Clark and Colin Chapman going to Lamborghini and Jimmy sitting in a P400 Miura before the 66 Italian Grand Prix and telling everybody how nice it was. You'd think he'd be loyal to Lotus. It's the same thing. People, why wouldn't they all live together? Don't they all live down there? I think, don't they?
Yeah, they're all around Monaco.
Toto probably lives in the UK, but yeah, I wouldn't. I think that to me, that's all just social media stuff. People wanting to create stories, and they're quite readable stories. I'm not negative about those people creating those stories, but the reality is
that's F1.
You'd see Max and George probably having a pizza together somewhere. Oh, they're big, whatever. So what? It happens, and George will have dinner on the yacht for sure.
This is the weird and wacky world that is F1.
Oh, yeah, that's the trouble. When you get something like Netflix who are telling only 10% of the story, everybody's trying to then look at reality and tell another 10%, and it's all completely wrong. I note we haven't spoken about Max's car control on lap 1.
Yeah, hit me.
About that, Cameron.
What did you think? Was that
I'm still shaking in awe, actually.
It was
because
good.
I think any other driver, I'm just trying to think, as any other, I suppose Charles might have got away with it. Any other driver except Charles would have lost a lot at that point. Absolutely. And it would have been a massive multi-car shunt. No question about it. And his fingertip balance and control, when there was zero grip on the sand, when he had no business being there in the first place. What was he doing? I mean, Lando suddenly seeing him there on his left. I thought that was just the moment of the race. No question. And I put it right up there with that moment at the restart in Barcelona when he's on the mediums and he has that massive moment coming out of the last corner and doesn't overcorrect. And so it was there. So easy when you got no grip, just to overcorrect slightly. He didn't even do it to a millisecond. It was just perfect. And then he's immediately on the brakes, dead straight line. Bangs your uncle. He got P2. Bob's your uncle. And I think a lot of that was Oscar's creation, wasn't it? The way Oscar just ran wide mid-corner. Because Max was actually thinking of trying to pass Oscar on the outside. And Oscar runs a little bit wide. And in doing so, suddenly Lando's got all this space down the inside to go. And as they're accelerating out, Max has got to cover it a little bit. And all of a sudden, he's alongside Lando Norris. The last thing he needs. Lando just assumed he was going to back off.
No chance.
That was the best moment of the race. That was maybe one of the best race moments we're going to have of any race this year, actually.
He's not bad, this Max fella, Peter. He might win a couple of championships when he grows up.
Well, I tell you, I was going to say not bad this Zandvoort place either. I was there knocking it, saying how banal it was. And I still think it is in terms of being discerning. But that first section of road, nice wide hairpin, followed by that sort of kink and then braking area. It's a great bit of road. Reminds me a little bit of Sepang, actually. My Sepang was so good.
And getting rid of it next year or year after next. What do you make of that, Peter? Because again, it feels like
sad, very sad. No Grand Prix from 27 onwards, right? 26 is in last year, right? And I think it's very sad. I mean, Zandvoort's had a good run in various iterations over the years. Lot of amazing things have happened at Zandvoort. Lots of new cars have had their first race there. Lots of great drivers have had their first race there, first wins there. Manufacturers have had their first wins there. It's a significant part of the Formula One World Championship. And it says, what does it say? That Holland, Germany, France, 3 of the biggest countries in terms of Formula One's audience and catchment area, do not have races. What does that tell you? I think it tells us that it's all about show and underwriting and the way governments of countries will no longer go along with the Formula One business model. Or even local governments of countries will not go along with the Formula One business model, which is a great shame. If I was running it all, I would make sure that we had all the classic races still on the calendar, by which I mean, obviously, Italy, Belgium, the UK, but in addition, France, Germany, Holland,
Yeah.
probably see one or two others. But I think it's very wrong for Formula One not to have Grand Prix in those countries. He says, easy for me to say that. Put up the money, Windsor. But
I,
that's the problem. The business model of Formula One, you're not supposed to make money as a race promoter. That's the trouble. And that's for sure the issue that Zandvoort have got. All the money goes to the Formula One industry. And on top of that, it's a difficult country in which to get money and sponsorship together, despite the success of Max Verstappen.
yeah. It will be a travesty, a very sad day. The year that we don't have on the calendar, Suzuka, Zandvoort, Spa-Francorchamps, and potentially Silverstone. Is F1 still F1 then, even, Peter?
Well, Zandvoort and Suzuka both designed by John Hugenholtz, who wanted a nice long straight, no bank corners, lots of fast corners, and something else. Oh, yes, a grandstand opposite the start-finish line. Well, we got the grandstands, but everything else, Formula One wants to go the other way. And yet there's something about Zandvoort in its original form and Suzuka in its original form, which is still today, that make them great Grand Prix circuits. And we're not learning from that. We're just emasculating Formula One circuits into sort of DRS specials with long straights.
It's sad times, Peter. It is sad
Well, it
times.
is. I don't want to sit here saying, oh, they were the good times and it's all woe now. It's not. There's lots of very good things. But I think we need to be paying attention to the past and the heritage of the sport in order to grow, not for the sake of the heritage, but in order to move forwards as well. We need the complete picture.
Well, you've got to see, Peter, ultimately you get the best of F1 and F1 cars when you see F1 cars in their natural habitat, right? And that's high and medium speed turns, because there are no other vehicles in the world that can take that speed through a Maggotts or a Beckett's or a Radillon.
That's right. Or a second Lesmo.
Yeah, 100%. That's the unique selling point of Formula One, and nothing else can compete with it in that sense. Not on
No, and it's interesting that a lot of the reason for the push to pass and the active arrow is because Formula One appears to be paranoid about the top speed of the new cars. And they want the top speed to be the fastest in the world of road courses, as distinct from ovals. And yet you've hit the nail on the head. It's not about top speed. It's about how quick they can go through corners like the second Lesmo. That's what Formula One is all about.
Yeah.
And if it's considered to be too difficult for the public to understand that, then that's Formula One's fault for not doing a better job of selling that and of showing that. In the same way that Formula One loves to talk about it being itself being the pinnacle of technology, it does all it can to hide its technology from the fans, treat it as secret. So secret that the other teams don't even know what to do with their arrow now.
Yeah. Oh, Mr. Windsor, you're a legend. Let me ask you this finally. There's a rumour this morning that Christian Horner, I mean, he's always going to find his way back onto the grid by dint of equity this time. There's a rumour that the next time that we see him on the grid, it won't be at Alpine, as was conjectured and speculated. It will be at Aston Martin. Peter, are you buying or selling that rumour?
Well, I'd like to buy it because I never understood all this business about Adrian's got to leave because he can't stand working with Christian Horner anymore. And I could never understand that. And nobody, of course, could go into details because nobody knew the details. So if he does go to Aston, it proves me correct that it was nothing to do with Christian Horner that he left. Having said all of that, why they'd want to work for the Strolls, I don't know. And you haven't seemed to have raised the subject of Lance Stroll's performance on the weekend.
Oh, gosh, do we need to, Peter?
Well, Fernando Alonso in the race. What more do you want?
But I mean, he's eaten it into the barrier twice, right, around the set. I don't know where I stand. Go on, you tell me, Peter. Does Lance... I'll ask the question this way. Does Lance Stroll's performance and he's keen, he's willing, does it still warrant a place on the F1 grid and that Aston Martin, therefore?
Well, if in order for Stroll to continue to bankroll that team, it means having Stroll in one car, then I suppose you say he's totally justified in being in Formula One. what else can you say? There are a lot of people employed there who are happy, making a lot of money, whatever they're doing. And Fernando, for one, can't wait next year if he stays to drive an Adrian Newey car. And so there you go. But is it worth it? I don't know. If I was Stroll Senior, I wouldn't be doing it, that's for sure. Not, and if I was that obsessed with my son and his success and wanting to control his life that way, I wouldn't do it, because it's quite clear that he's not going to be the driver that he thinks he is.
There's trouble over at Aston Martin, methinks, and I'm not just talking about the F1 team. Aston Martin, Lagonda are going through all these restructure issues. There's rumour of a potential buyout from various different Chinese motoring company. I think there's something going on there, Peter. They've got 1.5 billion in debt now.
Is that more than they normally have in the whole thing?
It's gone up. He's done over the past couple of months loads of like refinancing deals and restructuring. There's something going on there. Me looking through their financial statements, I'm trying to understand it. I'm not there yet, but there's something happening there. I don't know if it's a sale. It might be. It might be. There were loads of meetings happening over there at Aston Martin with Mercedes, who are a minority shareholder. Something's I wouldn't be surprised if it were an acquisition over the next 6 to 12 months.
Maybe Honda will buy it.
Potentially, but do Honda have that much? I mean, it'd be a leverage, but I don't know. Something's happening there, though, Peter.
Well, no, if there's all that debt, all they got to do is buy the debt and buy the company for $1, wouldn't they?
Yeah, agreed. I can't work it out. I need to have another comb through their financial statements, but there's something going on, and I
can't work out any of it. All I know, all it seems to be the case is that nobody ever sees to spend their own money. It's always somebody else's, some bank, some investment, some this. Billions in debt. Oh, it's not my debt. Even though I own the company. It's always the way. So I don't know. Way over my head. Over my pay grade, as you say. But it's astonishing, isn't it, that Lance is driving so badly now? And I can only assume it's because Rob isn't that well. I know he's still doing days and he's still the same old Rob, but he's not as around as much as he used to be. And I'm just assuming that Lance isn't doing as many days as Rob. And look how quickly you go off the boil when you don't do your Rob days.
Exactly, Peter. And I don't think it's. I don't think Lance Stroll is a bad driver, but I don't think he can execute without willing, right? Like, I mean, you said it the other day about was it Carlos Sainz that yeeted it into the barrier? But same thing with Lance. He's going sideways into the barrier, and there he is with both hands on the steering wheel, as if only a couple of months ago he wasn't suffering from wrist issues. I'm like, even I know that, and I've never driven an F1 car before. Take your hands off the bloody steering wheel, Lance. It's noddy things like that make me question whether he wants to be there in the first instance.
Yeah, more worrying actually was the second shunt, because if anything, Lance was a little bit able to get the front end to work because of the amount of time he spent with Rob, and to feel the front and not to have wide, sharp entries. And yet that second shunt was all to do with a snappy, wide entry, catching a left rear on the grass, and everything that Rob would teach you not to do, he did in that 1 millisecond. So that's more of a worry. The other thing, untimed practice, going through that thing, going too quickly, that stupid corner with the banking. I say stupid corner. I love the old Hanserag, that whole new thing. I don't like it at all. But with the banking there, I mean, it's got to be relatively straightforward for a driver of any skill to be able to do that on a consistent basis. I know Lewis made a mistake, slightly different, following other cars, slightly wet. Untimed practice on a Friday,
Unbelievable. What is he doing, Peter? Really? That, remarkable ineptitude. I don't know. Anyway.
Yeah. And also how well Fernando drove the other car all weekend. It never looked out of shape, never looked out of position, disappointingly slow in qualifying, bearing in mind how quick it had been on Friday, and terrible strategy in the race and traffic the whole time. Couldn't do anything. Short middle stint, I think. They tried to get him out, didn't work. But nonetheless, very polished and very nice. And I suspect, half the problem, I did predict this actually, half the problem is that it's very difficult for a guy like Stroll to look at a guy like Alonso and try to work out why Alonso's as good as he is.
Yeah.
Because 99% of Alonso's skill is all to do with his footwork and how he manages the car through the throttle and the brake.
Yeah.
And that's quite difficult to emulate when the movement and the feel and the subtlety of the movement is much smaller than the digital telemetry can read. Then it's difficult for a guy like Stroll, and he'll get confused then, because you'll see Fernando turning in with quite an abrupt turn in, a little bit like the one where he crashed that caused him to crash. But Fernando does it differently. Yes, it's quite abrupt and spiky, but he's not doing it exactly where Stroll did it. A and B, he's got his footwork is already in play at that moment, whereas Stroll's wasn't, obviously. And that was the problem. Fernando's managing the dynamic weight even when he's giving it that bit of spiky input, whereas Stroll was just giving it spiky input and then hoping that he'd get on top of the back of the car.
And yet, and still he finishes in 7th.
One
place down the road,
more strategy and everything else. Not
because of the timing of the pit stop.
Fernando, but he did okay in the race. If he's starting at the back, all he can do is move forward. And obviously that Aston Martin was a half reasonable car. So, good drive in the race. Won't take that away from him. But 2 crashes,
it's not good enough. Can you imagine being an Aston Martin
on
engineer?
Your own. Sorry?
Can you imagine being an Aston Martin engineer, Peter? I'd be...
No, and the other point we haven't talked about, Cameron, was Charles' red mist when he passed George as well.
Go on, what do you make of that then, Peter?
Well, the steward said, it was so difficult, we give up, and threw their hands up in despair at the end of that, and no penalty. To me, we keep forgetting it. Well, I keep forgetting this side of Charles, which was the side that was most in evidence in that massive battle with Alex Albon in GP2 at Abu Dhabi, when he was doing exactly what he did to George in the Dutch Grand Prix. And we've seen it a few times since, but it doesn't arise very often. And Charles, obviously very irritated that he was behind George, just absolutely red mist in a place where George would never have imagined in a million years Charles would be. And quite correctly feeling that there wouldn't have been enough room to do anything there anyway. And Charles nonetheless going through with the maneuver in a way that you would expect a Sonoda or a Lawson to do, sort of thing, and got away with it. In that both cars sort of accelerated out of the corner. George shell-shocked, obviously, and touching and damaging the Merc. But I'm absolutely amazed that the steward said there wasn't enough evidence to suggest he was off the track, because you could see quite clearly that the only question is the right front. You can see quite clearly that he's the wrong side of the white line as he's alongside George. So if that's not off the track, what is? And yet he got away with it. Now, I'm a big fan of Charles Leclerc. I love the way he drives, and I still think he's not far away from Max and would be right with Max if he'd had a slightly different team and career so far. And he could quite still, if he went to Red Bull, he could still be right there. I think he's amazing. But I can't think of another, just as I can't think of any driver on the grid that could have held the moment that Max held. I can't think of any other driver on the grid that would do what Charles did to George yesterday. That to me was outrageous, actually.
He's
doesn't come under the heading of a great pass, because it was just like muscling my way in at a place where there wasn't enough room anyway.
Coming through. Bumper cars.
What was your take on it?
I thought it was borderline. I thought he was. It was just borderline enough to where it was a difficult decision for the race director and stewards to make. It reminded me a lot of Monza 21. If they hadn't had an accident, Lewis and Max, it would have been very set. Like he's kind of
Lewis. Into the second chicane. You mean?
Exactly, or first, I think. Yeah. So I think Charles has been quite crafty. He's petulant. But in his execution of the move, he's...
Sorry, you're talking about Lewis Max first chicane.
Yeah.
I was thinking about Lewis and Charles year before into the second.
Oh, yeah. Very similar.
Outside.
Yeah.
I think, wasn't he?
Yeah.
But not quite the same, because he wasn't just sort of barging his way through. Sorry, I take what you say.
Both forcing the stewards to make... It's not a slam dunk. So it depends whether you've caught... the FIA, the stewards... Carlos Sainz, Peter, in closing. How did they work that out? That Carlos Sainz
Well,
deserved the
just like with poor Carlos Sainz, if there's ever a situation, he's always going to be the guy who gets the blame.
finished.
Always.
He's finished at the altar of his dad's sins, of course. Fair and reasonable are our Lord and Saviour, the FIA. Always. Do you know what I mean? In them we trust, Mr. Windsor.
I love the way Charles, when he had his shunt later on, just sat on the bank watching Ayrton Senna like.
So what do you go on then, Peter? What do you make of this? Because that felt like a statement to me, right? I know Lando did similar.
I think he was just interested in seeing all the cars and watching them, trying to work out why the McLaren was so good. I think that's all it was. And why not? Drivers very rarely get a chance to see all the other guys out there, and it's typical of Charles that he's intelligent enough to do that.
But wasn't he just on his phone, Peter? Like, well, there's pictures. I suppose
he might have been on the phone to his engineer or his mate saying, "Oh, I can't believe the traction of the McLaren here. This is where we're slow. And look, I've just seen how good the Racing Bull is. That's where they're good." He might have been saying all that. Why not? And anyway, he might have been ringing home and having a chat. But you can still watch racing cars and talk to your dog. Yeah.
That felt like a moment, Peter, again, not dissimilar to Lewis. It felt like a really seminal moment where in his mind at least, and again, maybe this is a bit of something of a nothing burger, but it felt like Charles had enough.
No, I didn't read that. I think that's over. Personally, I think it's overreading it. I think he was just, because he wasn't that upset afterwards, was he?
Was he not, Peter? Well, did he hear him? Did he hear him telling Ferrari? He was like, "Why did you do that to me? The tyres are fine." Again, you've kind of.
Well, I didn't hear that, but he wasn't absolutely livid when he got out of the car, and I think he was just. I thought, well, it's quite a good place to watch here. I don't want to go back to the Ferrari garage. That's boring. I'll go and watch the cars going round and round for a change. I think that's what it was. And stay away from all the press and all those annoying people and just watch these racing cars.
I wouldn't.
They probably learnt more second half of that race or last third of that race watching cars than most of the engineers in the pit lane know about Formula One.
True. I would forgive Charles for wanting to draw a line under his time at Scuderia Ferrari and start
of course,
to explore pastures anew. Get potentially Mercedes in 20 set. I think Charles people should be having conversations. How many years of his prime is he going to give away to Scuderia Ferrari and their
Agreed. But you don't leave Ferrari if you're Charles Leclerc unless it's definitely something better.
Correct. Yeah, I'd agree with that.
So again, it's like the Max thing. You stay where you are until you know what the field of play is in 2026. Who's doing what? Who's got a quick car? Who hasn't? And you try to make sure you're a free agent at that moment. If you are Charles Leclerc, Max Verstappen, George Russell, maybe even Isaac Hadjar, or maybe one of the two McLaren drivers as well. You want to make sure that you can get into the right car for 27. That's what it's all about. So at the moment, let's just wait and see where it goes in 26 and then make your move. But yeah, obviously it would have, I've said many times, I think Charles' career has definitely been affected by being part of Ferrari for its entirety, and it's brought out that emotional side of Charles that you never see with Max or Oscar Piastri, for example, and that's because of the team in which he's been working in all these years. So yeah, it would be lovely to see Charles in a much quieter, lower key team like Red Bull or Mercedes and see how he goes, but he's not going to do that unless it's the right slot. And that could be at Red Bull with Hadjar, for example, if Max goes somewhere else. It could be at Mercedes. He wouldn't want to be alongside George, I wouldn't have thought, but it'd still be nice to see him going through the whole UK team thing.
Yeah. Take your chances at this stage. There's more risk that comes with staying at Scuderia Ferrari, especially if you've got perfect knowledge, than the risk to leaving and going somewhere else. I don't see any change anytime soon, but what do I know?
Yeah, he would think in any given year, even in a bad year, he's going to win a few races in a Ferrari. Well, that's not the case in 2025, but hopefully he might still win a race or two. You never know. But right now, apart from the car being very slow, it's a good team to be with. Oh, sorry, and the strategy calls.
Yeah. Oh, Peter, I don't know.
But again, I just cannot believe that they have this thing that you've got to cover whoever is doing the undercut. It's pathetic. I think it'd be Formula One would be much better if they got rid of all the strategy departments from all the teams and started from square one, and just use chief mechanics to make the decision.
I think you get
Most
better
of the chief
decisions.
mechanics I've ever known have got great racing brains, and most of them go on to become team managers and so forth. And they're the people that make the right calls at the right moment in the heat of battle, not strategy people who sit around looking at computer screens all day.
And not bombshell, Mr. Windsor. You've been a legend. Super generous of your time as always. And for that, I am grateful ad infinitum in perpetuity. If you are not subscribed to the Peter D. Windsor YouTube channel, then why are you punishing yourself? What are you doing with your life?
Come on now, Cameron.
Go over there and subscribe as soon as you can. And then if you prefer to ingest your peculiar brand of F1 insight and analysis on a podcasting platform, then it's the Short Corners podcast. If you're watching this on the YouTubes, then like, share and comment. If you are listening on a podcasting platform, then do me a favour and 5 stars poured for forward between now and next time. Of course, remember to look but never stare.